Fox News liberal Bob Beckel decided to take off the mask and flat out parrot right-wing talking points.
Leveling of the trust in government began in the Johnson years. Vietnam had a lot to do with that. Nixon, obviously, in Watergate. You go on through. The last one who probably got through it all right was Eisenhower, and maybe Kennedy until he was killed. But let's remember that Roosevelt also started a lot of programs. Johnson did the Great Society, and this is a liberal talk, and I've said this here many times, and I'll repeat it again. They were all well-intentioned, but we bred generations of dependent people.
Thank you, Sean Hannity / Bill O'Reilly / Mitt Romney / Rush Limbaugh / Mike Huckabee / every Republican ever. I'm so happy they put a liberal on Fox News. Okay, that's false, and I'll prove it to you based on numbers and data and statistics. So the war on poverty, the social safety net in general, the Great Society, they were all tremendous successes. First of all, how would you prove dependence on these programs? And how would you prove that they're a failure? Well, it's actually pretty simple. What percentage of the programs are waste, fraud, and abuse? And if it's a high number, well, then yeah, we could say safely that these have been a failure. So let's go right to the mothership, the two programs that conservatives bitch about the most: Social Security Disability and food stamps. I've never heard them bitch about any other programs more than these two. They bitch about welfare, but they bitch about these even more. Social Security Disability, nothing but people playing golf when they pretend to be injured. Food stamps, there's so much fraud in food stamps. Okay, so what's the fraud rate? 1% and 1.3%. Now, to be clear, this is not me speaking. I didn't get these numbers from Code Pink or the New Black Panthers. This is a USDA study that looks specifically into this, and also Census Bureau numbers. 1% and 1.3%. Okay, that to me seems like the programs are actually pretty effective. Also, it's hard to be dependent on these programs when most of them have hard time limits. So at a certain point, you can't continue to get the program. You get kicked off. So how are you going to be dependent on a program if you're only allowed to take it for X amount of time? Doesn't dependence entail, hey, you perpetually need it? Well, you can't have it after a certain point in time. Okay. Not to mention, for the past 5 years, for every one job opening in the U.S. economy, there are between 3 and 7 people. So, in other words, the math doesn't add up. The math doesn't add up. Some people are going to be unemployed. And when people are unemployed, what do? Let them starve in the street and die? Or have some semblance of a safety net where, okay, you're not going to die, you're not going to go crazy because you have no means whatsoever. We're just going to make sure that you have the bare minimum. So when you look at the math, you go, only a heartless idiot could say, I don't want to have a social safety net, or we should cut it drastically. Also, the minimum wage is not a living wage either. There are 10+ million working poor people who rely on these programs, even though they're productive citizens. I mean, stop and think about that. How even people who work full-time jobs at minimum wage, they need the social safety net. But here's fucking dipshit liberal Bob Beckel saying, breeding dependence. Dependence? These people are productive citizens doing their job for society, but society or their company is not doing their job for them. So you need tax dollars and you need the government to pick up the slack if these companies are not going to do their fucking job and pay them a living wage, which, by the way, they should. Now, here are the debate-ending facts. How well have these programs worked? Now, conservatives, Republicans, now apparently Bob Beckel, they would say, well, no, they breed dependence and they don't work. They've been a massive failure. Let's go one by one here. The WIC program, which gives formula and milk and some other things to new mothers, that kept 397,000 people out of poverty. Welfare, 641,000 people kept out of poverty. Child support, 1.3 million people. Unemployment, 2.4 million people kept out of poverty. Housing subsidies, 2.8 million people. Food stamps, 5 million. Okay, I still haven't even gotten to the biggest numbers. The Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. So these are basically tax cuts, or you could define them as tax subsidies to the poor. 9.4 million people kept out of poverty because of those. Thank you, government. Thank you, social safety net. And Social Security, 26.6 million people kept out of poverty. These are overwhelming success stories, and the whipped cream and cherry on top. What's called the SPM poverty rate is 16%. Okay? If the government programs weren't there, it'd be 25%. Chopping off 9 percentage points like that because of the social safety net. And finally, the senior citizen poverty rate was 35%. And then Social Security came along. Once that kicked in, 10%. 25% cut off of the senior citizen poverty rate. Grandma doesn't have to starve in the street or die bankrupt anymore. Isn't that a lovely thing? Isn't that a wonderful thing? But here you have Fox News liberals agreeing with the conservatives. Oh, yeah, government dependence. These programs suck. They're bad. Here, some bootstraps. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Let me ask you a question. Wouldn't it be nice if there was actually a Fox News liberal who would come out there armed with these facts and figures and say, here's the reality, dumbasses. These programs worked, and I want an apology from each and every one of you because these are good people who use these programs, and they need it. But that's not going to happen. I wish it would happen, but it's not going to happen.